appreciate you talking to us. Just what have you seen out of the guys that are really first timers for your defense, and how much have you seen the growth from those guys, like even though Nehemiah and Jalen, some of those guys, Colby Wooden, that have really had to step up?
Right. Kobe, Nehemiah, those kind of guys that had been in the program and gone through off season before, spring practice before, fall camp before, and a season, we kind of knew what we had there, and we knew the potential of those guys. But it's the normal process of this thing. They took the next step. Nehemiah's played some very good football. Kobe Wooden is a guy that is he is very responsible and accountable to do his job on every play. So it's the normal maturity that you've had, and even Zacoby McClain. I mean, he's a guy that's leading the SEC in tackles, and that's not easy to do. And really, at the start of the year, he was not. Well, we always talk about 18 starters, but he was not the guy that they introduced on the video board. So we've had a lot of those guys that we knew what they were in terms of, and it was just the maturity process.
Next is Nathan King.
Hey Kevin, talking about a little bit going off of Zacoby and Owen, what kind of response have you seen out of them? Obviously playing a lot of snaps right now without KJ. What has their attitude been like toward that? Obviously they've played very well in response.
Yeah, everybody wants to play, and so they've taken their responsibility very seriously, and they're very mature about it. They're pros in that regard. The thing you have to watch is the pitch count that you get into. Because some of those games get into 80, 85 snaps. That's a lot of snaps. And then the guys behind them are extremely young and inexperienced. So you got to be calculated to when you substitute. I think that's probably been the biggest thing, is that they've not wanted to come out. They're not over there asking for a break, and that speaks volume for their competitiveness.
Next is Bill Cameron.
Sort of continuing on that, Tyrone and Daquan were playing an awful lot of snaps. Looks like you're getting healthier there. And obviously this past week had a chance to play some of the younger guys. Just talk about the improved health and the plan for this week with the open day.
Yeah, well, that's two big different questions there, as you well know. And I think the biggest thing was, Tyrone was having to play early in the year, first, second, and third down on every rack of plays, and that's hard for those guys that are 300, 320, 325 pounds, and so the rotation, the guys getting healthy, has helped in terms of being able to keep guys fresh on the field. And Newkirk, same way, Kobe the same way. Actually, Big Cat, he fought through the injury, but it put pressure on us in terms of trying to keep guys fresh in the defensive line. As far as the open date, it's traditional what we do. We've got 2 days where we work on the upcoming opponents, not the next opponent. So we worked Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas A&M yesterday, today. That still gives us, because of the schedule, 2 Tuesday practices and 2 Wednesday practices for first and second down and red zone third down for Mississippi State. So we'll start that on Friday. So we've got extra time on the next opponent, but we had 2 days where we could build some things that so that when we get to practice week, because those practice weeks are real condensed and they're shorter than people think, in terms of when you get into the 20-hour rule of game planning, installing the game plan, repping the game plan for all the different things. First and second down, goal line, short yardage, red zone, 2 minute, all those kind of things factor in, and it changes each week, and it's a pretty rapid pace. So we're looking not only to get guys well in this time and get guys fresher, heal up some more, but also it gives us time to go back, and we've got a lot of young guys in the 2 deep rotation. and so we can go back to our base stuff. It's not game plan stuff. It's our base stuff against Tennessee, Alabama, Texas A&M, and rep some of that. So it helps the young guys a great deal.
Thanks.
Next coach is Steve Moulton.
Yes, Coach. Where do you think you've improved the most, and where do you think you need to get it better moving forward, Coach?
Well, we have a standard, and we've played the guys have played some really good defense over the last. This is the 5th year now. There's a lot of good snaps on tape for 5 years of really good defensive football, but we're never satisfied ever. And so there's always areas to improve, things to improve on, individual improvement, schematic, altering things to what our guys do best. There's always room for improvement. It never stops. And so, we've done some good things and played. I think probably the biggest thing is we've continued to play with relentless effort. For the most part, we've had a few blips on the radar, but for the most part, we've tackled well. We came out in the first game and tackled well, which I had a big concern about that under the circumstances we were coming into that first game. Probably the biggest thing is that the glaring thing statistically is the fact that our third down defense took a major hit. We had been in the top teams in the country for 4 years, and this year just was not very good. So we've studied that every week, which we normally do. We've studied it this week in the off week, and I think probably the biggest thing that came out of that is there's a lot of areas for improvement in it, and the biggest culprit is first and second down defense and not getting in so many third and shorts. That's the biggest culprit. Now there's other things that are that. And then figuring out what our guys did best. I think we've got a little bit better beat on what we do well, because each team has a personality, each team has strengths and weaknesses, and you have to adjust that. So that's probably the biggest thing in terms of the glaring thing. The run defense, you've heard me say this before. If you play, Army and Georgia Southern, your run defense is going to look different if you play, Texas Tech and Oklahoma. It's just going to look different because of the number of times people throw and the number of times that people run. So the biggest thing is you can't panic, because actually we're at 3.9 yards per carry, which is the lowest it's been at this point in time in a 5-year period. So at yards per carry is what we really look at. So that's not a glaring problem. But the thing that it goes back to is what is it on first down, and particularly the first down run defense. And there's been some things early in where that we didn't either tackle well. We were not really in terms of controlling our gaps. We've improved that, I think, in a good way, but we've still got a ways to go.
Next question is Gianna Hahn.
Hi, Coach. Last time we talked about how there's that really intense competition for the second cornerback spot. Obviously, you've had some injuries since then, but have you seen that competition develop through the season, and how are each of those guys doing?
Yeah, that's kind of been a fun group to kind of watch. Obviously, Roger is kind of, I won't say in a class by himself, but he's played the most. He's been consistent at it, and it's gone on for 2 seasons now. But then the other side is where we had, Simpson started it, then he pulled his hamstring, was out. Damio had some injuries, was in the mix, then had injuries, and it was pretty long term in terms of trying to get him back. Nehemiah stepped up and did very well. Damio is back in the mix now and playing very well. He's had some really good days of practice in a row now. Played some meaningful snaps against LSU early in the game, and so that's helped us. And then with Pritchard and Roger, those three are the primary guys.
Next coach is Jordan Hill.
Kevin, how happy are you with the growth from the defensive front, from the issues early in had some injuries as well, to how well you guys played against LSU last week?
Well, I think obviously it helps to have everybody as healthy as you can get them and have the total group together. That helps. But, you know, we're not in the excuse business. We're in the production business. And the production business doesn't matter who's out there, you need to produce. And that's all of us. And so it's helped, but we're not going to use that as really why that happened. I think it's maturity. I think it's hard work. I think it's really getting in focused in terms of, you know, what the standard is and what is acceptable and what's unacceptable. So there's a lot of factors in what you saw last Saturday. Now the big thing is, you know, obtaining success is one thing, you know, but sustaining it is another. And that's where the key is right now. Sustain that.
Next is J.G. Tate.
Hey Kevin, I like that production business thing. That's definitely true. Tell me about Ladarius Tennyson. You've been playing him more lately, and it looks like he's going to be a hell of a player. Talk about what you like about him and kind of his progress this year.
Yeah, we were really disappointed that we didn't have spring practice with 10, and you know, he's a violent tackler. He's extremely quick. He loves to compete, highly competitive guy. He just he needed repetition, and so I think what you're seeing is he's coming into his own. Had meaningful snaps in the LSU game early in the game. We would have probably seen that earlier in the year had we had traditional preparation, because he's a talented young man.
Next is Nathan King.
Hey Kevin, I guess in the preseason you were speaking very highly of Colby and what you thought he could do this season. Has he pretty much looked exactly like you thought he would? You were kind of talking about it a little bit before, and can you just kind of speak to his determination there to go from a player that was a lot smaller to kind of bulk up and
Right.
play a lot on the defensive line?
Well, first of all, he's a pro at what he does. He is a man. He's not emotional about things in terms of you know, getting up and down. He comes to work every day with the same attitude, and you know, attitude is the key. That's a big starting point. And he's got such a good attitude, and it's a work ethic attitude. He knows to get where he needs to get, and for us to get where we need to get, it's going to take hard work, and he doesn't shy away from that. So a lot of that's personality. In terms of his play, I kind of liken it a little bit. Now, they're different positions, different style players, but a little bit like Dontavius Russell. You know, Dontavius Russell played around here, and when he left, I mean, there were other guys that have left that, you know, how you going to replace this guy? But that was a hard guy to replace, because he did his job. And it was hard to find snaps on the tape where he did not do his job. And Kobe is very similar in that regard. He lines up and he knows his job. He knows what his job is, and he works extremely hard to do his job, and most times gets his job done. So not surprised at all. You know, like I said, we talked about it earlier and saw it coming. This is not a surprise. I mean, he has a pro mentality.
Next is Jason Caldwell.
Yeah, another one of those guys. You mentioned a little bit about Roger McCreary, but how have you seen him progress, going from one of the guys to that guy that you know you think about putting on a top guy or the guy that you consider your top guy? How have you seen him progress in that role?
Well, again, it goes back to that word of maturity, but he is, I think with him, is confidence. You know, when you play out there at that position, if you have a problem, everybody knows who it was, and that was 23. If somebody's in the wrong gap, half the stadium may not figure out who it was. You know, so there's a lot of pressure there, and the best way to combat pressure is to know your job, to understand what other people are trying to do to attack you, and through that, he has studied the game at a big push to be a smart football player and understand his job as well as how they're going to try to attack you, whether it's a stem release, whether it's alignment, cutting it down, expanding their and understanding that. And so he's kind of taking it to the next level in that regard. And with that, his confidence is very, very high. And so when you got a skill set like he's got and you have high confidence, then you tend to play pretty well.
Coach, we got time for 3 more quick ones. The first is from Steve Moulton.
Yes, Coach. Speaking of, you mentioned earlier of guys hard to replace on the field. Tell me about having to replace the likes, at least on the field, of KJ Britt. And not only that, but how much is he still a part of what you guys do defensively in game planning and scheming?
Well, he's not a part of the. I didn't see him in any defensive meetings in terms of game planning and planning, scheming the things up. But he is a very big part. He's helping us on the field, coach the young guys. He's high energy. He's involved just like he was as a player. He's not doing anything any different. He just can't play for us. As far as missing him on the field, well, I think probably the best way to answer that is, what would you write today if the starting quarterback was out? And that'd be a big deal. I'm sure y'all would all write a story about it. And so, that was our starting quarterback on defense. So it was a big. He quarterbacked the whole thing, and that's hard to replace. Now, fortunately, Owen is a guy that has grown a lot in 2 years, and he stepped up in a big way. But it's hard to replace.
Next is Brian Matthews.
Yes, sir, Kevin, thank you for speaking to us. I wanted to ask you about Derek Hall. What have you seen from his development this season, and what does it mean to your defense to have that production out of the button linebacker position against LSU?
Well, obviously, any production by any position is, if it's that kind of production, is good. I think the biggest thing with Derek, he's a smart guy, very cerebral, easy to coach. But just in terms of growing in the SEC, in terms of just toughness, and I'm not saying he was soft. That's not what I'm saying. It's just the normal maturity of playing that position in the SEC and being relentless with your effort, your technique, your physical and mental toughness, snap after snap after snap, and he's matriculated to that point, and then you see the production go up.
Coach, our last question is from Jordan Hill.
Kevin, looking to matching up with Mississippi State with that offense, just what does that challenge present to any defensive backs, knowing what they're going to be looking to do?
Well, I was talking to one of the fellow defensive coordinators in the SEC that we kind of talk weekly, and the SEC West has kind of become a little bit offensively in terms of game planning for some of the teams. It's almost like the Big 12. We've got Briles at Arkansas, who was with Baylor. We've got I can't recall his name. I should. I'm not trying to. I know his name. I just can't recall it. The coordinator at Ole Miss, who's his brother-in-law, was there at Ole Miss. Was there at Baylor, and then you got Mike Leach. So we got 3 Big 12 coaches, offensive scheme-wise, in the SEC West now, and that's changed things a little bit. So it's not the traditional play Alabama, Georgia, LSU style offense. It's a different style offense, and so you have to kind of approach things a little bit different. I think the biggest thing is, they got receivers running all over. When you watch a tape and you only have 9 runs in the whole tape, that tells you right there. You got a game where it's 9 runs. It's a little different calling than calling a traditional SEC game. Puts a lot of pressure on your pass rush, puts a lot of pressure on your coverage. They've got 5 out a lot, and so it's a little bit different schematically in terms of preparation.